people see my name, they have a better chance at pronouncing it than looking at Carlo Koliakovo's last name and attempting that one. So mine's a little bit easier. Yeah.
I feel like there are certain names out there. His is one, and I remember Pietrangelo's another one. Trying to explain that to like a 10-year-old playing like NHL 22 franchise mode, you need to get Andi Petrillo. He's like
Pietrangelo. That's how the Italian.
Yeah. I just forget. I'm just like just get him, or all right, try to sign Shea Theodore. Either one of those. It's like a name that you can pronounce. Great. I want to ask you, because kind of talking a little bit about the name side of things. I remember, I don't know if you said this on air or if it was like in a book, or I believe you said it dealing with Bob Cole, but I thought it was interesting because I'm a fellow Newfie, and I know there are people out there like, you don't say Newfie. I'm like, listen, as a Newfie, I feel like I can get away with saying Newfie.
There you go.
It was like you mentioned at one point you went down, and this is, I guess, when you were first kind of starting off with Hockey Night, you were trying to, pronounce people's names, get their names right. And I think Bob Cole either like took you aside and said, hey, you have to say it the same way I say it. And I'm sitting there, and I think you might have mentioned this on Overdrive. And I was just like, why? Like, I get people like Bob Cole. It's nothing as slander against Bob, but I'm like, she's trying hard to get these people's names right. And just because you don't know how to say Gianta doesn't mean that she can't learn how to say Gianta. But like, how did you feel at that? Because you're just starting in the door. Are you taking his advice and going like, okay? Or are you kind of telling Bob like, I'm trying to learn these names. Can you try to learn them with me?
Yeah. No, you know what? I will say he said it actually in a very kind way.
Yeah.
But he wanted to make sure, and this is something that is still the same, like even till this day in my career, it never goes away. And that is trying to pronounce the best of your ability people's names, because some of them are difficult. And with your broadcast partners, if we're going to agree on a name, then it needs to be said that way by all of us, right? Like, so for example, somebody I can think of would be the speed skater Charles Hamelin. He wants to be known as Charles Hamelin. So as long as we are across the board saying his name that way, then we're golden. But if I say Charles Hamelin and then I throw to my co-host and he goes Charles Hamlin, you know what I mean? Like it can throw people. Everyone's like, why is she saying it one way? Why is he saying it another? It is so like the pronunciation of names is so important because it's somebody's name. But man, oh man, can it ever be the bane of your existence too if it's difficult to pronounce. So I actually appreciated when Bob Cole, he pulled me aside and he said, all right, just so you know, this is how I say their names. And if you happen to interview them or if you happen to mention them in a story, make sure you say it this way as well. And I'll give a lot of play-by-play guys credit. They speak to the athletes, a lot of them, like whenever they can, they get that FaceTime. I know guys who actually have recording devices and they will get each player to pronounce their names because they're the play-by-play guys. They're always saying their name. So they try to get it right all the time. I remember Chris Versteeg was a good one. So he came on over the Toronto Maple Leafs. He'd always been known as Chris Versteeg. He won a Stanley Cup with the Chicago Blackhawks as Chris Versteeg. Suddenly he walks in, he's like, everyone now, I am Christopher Versteeg. Not a big deal. I mean, his full name's Christopher. But he was adamant. And finally, one day I just said to him, like, why are you changing it? You've been in the league for years. And he goes, well, now I'm in a bigger market, right? He was in Toronto. And he goes, and now my mom was upset because she gave me the name Christopher. And she didn't like that people were shortening it to Chris. And I said, I can appreciate that, Mama Versteeg, but you can't really expect people where you're now towards the end of your career, everyone's always known you as Chris Versteeg. Like Christopher Versteeg just didn't roll off the tongue. So a lot of players, they'll change their name, because they're scared to tell you how to properly pronounce it if they're not North American. And then later in their careers, right, they get a little bit more emboldened. They say, actually, this is how you properly say it in, Russian, Slovakian, whatever. And then there are other players who said, well, my mom said that you actually have to pronounce it this way.
Here she is on the phone. You explain why. Because I wanted to mention to you when you left Leafs lunch, and I remember reading like the kind of press release for it. I was like, all right, my first main concern was like, I really hope she's not burnt out, or like, I hope it's nothing serious. But then there's a part of me, and I say this jokingly, where it was like, I see you on CBC the next minute. I'm like, oh, look at this girl. She got 2 contracts. She was doing Leafs lunch and CBC. Who does that? How does it even fly? I'm like, because I've never seen someone be on CBC and TSN And I remember watching Overdrive, and there'd be days that you would fill in. I'm like, all right, who's she kidding? It was like, yeah, she needed a break from what? She's back again. And then there would be people on Twitter being like, it's like, oh, it was like Andi Petrillo's back. Is she doing Leafs Lunch? I'm like, no, she crushed my heart on that one. Like, because that's what I would listen to at night. Like, obviously you change with the year, or sometimes you just kind of space in and out of things. I know with podcasting, people sometimes listen to these episodes, and then sometimes they don't like the person, sometimes they don't like me, and then they just go elsewhere. But that's how I would go to sleep at night. I would listen to Leafs Lunch and then Overdrive. And then when it was announced that you were not, like, you were leaving, I was like, all right, thanks, Andi. Aww. Like, that's a little less Leafs Lunch for me.
I know. Well, see, you kind of say that in a joking way, but I did take that into consideration. It wasn't easy for me to just say, okay, well, I'm going to leave this and go, because you know that, especially radio, you really create a relationship with the listeners. Like, and I knew people had a routine, whether I was part of their lunch break. I know a lot of people would contact me because, you know, depending on their jobs, they were in their cars a lot. Yeah. And Leafs Lunch was what got them through those 2 hours, and that was their entertainment. So I completely understand how I became a part of people's lives. And it wasn't a very easy decision, you know, to make. And there were a lot of things behind the scenes and the humming and the hawing. Do I stay? Can we do this more? What else can I do? Like, you know, you're just trying to fit these pieces of a puzzle together, but it just wasn't, you know, unfortunately coming together. But clearly I did leave on a very good note. Everyone understood the decision that was being made. Yeah. And that's why I still left. You know, it was a good relationship, but I get you. Like, trust me, it was not easy for me, because I knew that as much as, like, I asked people to let me into their lives, and they did. And now I was like, bye. I
just thought it was interesting because I always felt, now this is nothing against Sportsnet, because I had friends that work at Sportsnet or internship. I grew up on The Score. I grew up watching like Cabby. I grew up seeing that. And then I, as like 10 years old, you're like, I like The Score. But then when The Score kind of got overtaken, I've seen the people go from The Score to TSN. And then I kind of watched TSN because Jay and Dan, James Duthie. But I always felt like the women on TSN, they were getting their chance. Like, I just felt like they were getting a little bit more of a shot. And I grew up listening and watching Kate Burness. So when you kind of went into that fold, I was like, she is right where she needs to be. Because at CBC, when it was just the iDesk, I was like, she's the only girl there at the time, like in the studio side. And I'm like, geez, if we could get her, it was almost like when you're watching like a WWE or an NHL game, and you see the guy in the minors, and you're like, just give him a shot at the majors. And I know CBC is still a major, but I was just like, give her some females that she can kind of go inside with, like she can be a co-host or do things with. So when I do see you on Overdrive or on Leafs Lunch and you're interacting with people, I was like, wow, like, she's good. She knows her role, but she's also getting these other ladies that are experienced. So it doesn't feel like you were kind of like in a man's cage where it's like, all right, like, who do I associate with here? There's no other women around.
Yeah, no, listen, it's really, it's true. And we're seeing obviously more and more women. And by no means was I ever the first to knock down on the door. There were so many women who came before who are so incredible. But to your point, I want to say, when I joined Hockey Night in Canada, I think I was the fifth woman ever to be part of Hockey Night in Canada. And then first ever in studio, you know, to do that. So yeah, I mean, and then to your point, right? So you're kind of few and far between. And even though Cassie Campbell-Pascal, you know, was part of Hockey Night in Canada, she was doing a lot of things in Calgary. We're never really together, you know, when we were there. And I can share a story, you know, with you, just my experience though, right? With, you know, with TSN. And I remember this was when a lot of the turnover was happening, and Rogers had just purchased Hockey Night in Canada. And I really wanted to be a host, right? I wanted to be in the trenches. I wanted to do game. I wanted to do pre-game, halftime, post-game, right?
Yeah.
And because there are so many jobs that you can have in this industry. You can be a reporter, you could be at the desk reading highlights, right? Or you can be a game host. And I wanted to be a game host. And I found that that it was very easy for a lot of networks to put women in the highlight chair. Again, great. It's a great job. It's not an easy job because you need to, I mean, reading highlights, everyone thinks is easy. It's not easy. You have to have personality. You have to be engaging, and you have to know, you know, something about every single sport that you're doing. But it just wasn't my cup of tea because I felt it was just too easy for networks to transition women into that. I wanted to drive the ship.
Yeah.
And I do remember I was out of a gig. Like, so a lot of people forget this, that when the turnover happened with Hockey Night in Canada, I didn't have a job for a while. And then I ended up working at the NHL Network for a year. The NHL Network relocated to the States. They didn't bring their Canadian hosts with them. So I was out of a job again. In 1 year, I was out of a job twice. But I just happened to land on my feet very quickly. I hustled and I landed on my feet. But this one particular time, I thought I had booted myself out of the industry because I get a call from TSN. Mark Millier at the time, you know, was the head guy there. And he had asked me, do you want to do Sports Center? And I went,
okay.
I said, no. I said, no. I thank you. And like the fact that you're offering me a job when I clearly don't have one means the world to me. But I don't want to go down that path. I have worked so hard to be a game host. Like I've worked hard to be the next Ron McLean, the next, you know, James Duthie, Scott Russell, you name it. I'm like, I've been working towards that. I don't want to do this detour now. Yeah. And he goes, fine, I get that. I completely get that. If anything comes up, I'll let you know. And I'll just never forget leaving that meeting thinking, did I just shoot myself in the foot? Like, did I just boot myself out of the industry? Because I said no. But he ended up calling me a couple of weeks later. And he says, I don't have anything full time, but I can give you what you want on a part-time basis. And we'll see how it goes from there. And he ended up, that's when I ended up doing the Premier League on TSN, because there were days where Luke Weilman was doing play-by-play for other stuff, had to travel and he couldn't do weekends because he was doing Major League Soccer stuff. So then I would go in and I would fill in for him on the English Premier League and started doing soccer for TSN. And so that kind of happened in this rollover, you know, with the NHL Network. So at the time I started doing NHL Network and TSN at the same time. So, but I stuck to my guns, right? Like I really just wanted to be that host. And to your point, you know, TSN gave me that chance. They said, okay, you know, I mean, that's what you want. I hear you. Yeah. And when something came up, they called.
Doing a little bit of research, there's a lot of firsts that you've had, like the first female to host Leafs Lunch or have her own radio sports talk show. I believe in 2016, you won a Canada Screen Award, and that was the first time they kind of ever acknowledged a female host for a sporting host role. And then 2022, this year, you've got it for Best Sports Host again. So there's a lot of like firsts in between there. But the biggest first, I think, that goes a long way for, I guess, women in media or just having someone watch your back is you at 19 went into volunteer at York's Rogers. Yeah. And at the time, I believe maybe it was a few years later, but you worked your way up the rankings and was sports host and producer came. And the executives, from what I read anyway, is the executives were like, we don't want two females, one doing news, one doing sports. What's on the go here? I think the girl's name was Lisa McLean Stellick.
Lisa McLean, Gord Stellick's wife.
Yeah, she went to bat for you. And like, that's, to me, when I'm younger, when someone goes to bat for me, I'm like, of course you're going to go bat for me because you're my buddy and you're my friend. Why not? But like in those kind of roles, it's not like she has some leverage, but they could easily say, all right, you're gone too. We don't want her. We don't want you. So I know she was the station manager, but someone can still say, we're leaning more towards this way. But how big of a role, I know this is kind of going all over the place, but how big of a role was that for you that someone went to bat for you and ended up actually winning that because you actually did get to, and that kind of helped your career, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, listen, till this day, I mean, Lisa knows that I think the world of her. If she doesn't, I hope she does, because I do. I always mention her, and I always mention that story because that was also the first time that my gender ever got brought up. Like I've said this before, like I'm an only child. So my parents, I never had, like, it's not like I had a brother where my parents would treat him differently versus me. Like being the only child, it didn't matter, right? Like I did what's considered, you know, feminine things to do. I did what's considered masculine things to do because I was just, you know, getting it from both sides, right? And my parents never once told me I couldn't be something because I'm a girl, or do this because you're a girl, or you better act that way because you're a girl. It was never that way. But if anything, maybe it was too much not that way, because I do remember my mom one time said, I'm going to send you to modeling school because you need to learn proper etiquette. Look at you just running around like crazy. And she did. and it didn't work. So I was still a little rough around the edges. But so when Lisa, she had been my station manager for a while at that point, because I had been volunteering, I had been doing stuff in news. And when I knew the sports guy was leaving, and I went to her, I said, I want this gig and the time is perfect. I'm graduating from university at the exact same time. And she agreed. She goes, yeah, this is perfect and everything. And basically, had without, formally offering me the job, was saying, like, the gig's yours. I can't imagine it going to anyone else. And then I'll never forget, like a few days later, the look on her face when she said, she goes, I can't believe that I'm saying this, but I can't offer you the job. She goes, yet, she said, give me time because I'm not giving up on you. She's like, but I've basically been told that they don't want 2 women at the desk. And I'll never forget thinking, well, what the hell does that have to do with anything? It just never dawned on me. So I'm like, what? Like, I don't understand what that even means, right? You have 2 women at the desk. You see 2 men at the desk all the time. And then slowly, my wheels were turning. And I just went, oh, that is BS. Like, that is complete BS. And she knew it too, which is why whatever she said, that is still a mystery to me, because I don't know how those meetings went, but she clearly made her case and said that has to be one of the dumbest things, for not hiring somebody. And they gave me the gig and I never really looked back. I was there for 2 years before I ended up getting the job with Leafs TV and moved on. But of course, like, it feels incredible when someone goes to bat for you because they believe in you, which emboldens you. Obviously, a little bit more, gives you confidence that you're doing a great job. But it was also, like I said, the first time that I got a taste of, you can't have this job because you're a woman.
Yeah.
And I went, I don't like that.
I feel like, and how old were you when this was? Like, say, what, 20, 21, 22?
No, I probably would have been about 23, 24. I was just 24 because I was just graduating. Because I did university and college. So I did 4 years of university with 2 years of college, right? So but I ended up graduating when I was 24.
So like, how does that make you? And again, you feel free to answer it whatever way you do, or dodge it if you want to. We're not that type of. I'm not a TMZ where it's like, but it's like I remember being 24, 25, and applying to different roles in media, and just feeling like the disability side, because I have Sturge Weber, was like, that was what was holding the door closed. It's not that I don't have like the education. Maybe I didn't have the experience as much, but I did have something. But it was almost like, well, if you don't know about the disability, just ask. It's like, I'm clearly putting it on a piece of paper. I'm not hiding it, but I just felt like, kind of like, okay, is media even open for people like myself with disability? Like, what's closing the door? So, and I don't have any clout. I can't go in a room and be like, how dare you? But like, how do you feel at like 24? And this is like your first kind of inkling, like, all right, maybe I'm not going to get places because what about there's another woman there? They're not going to want me because they already have their woman.
Yeah, well, and so that's another topic, and and I'm happy to see that that's changed, right? Because for the longest time there was always like the token female, and sadly a lot of women who were the token woman wanted to stay that way and didn't help other women coming through. And I always say to women, do you want to be, the lone token, or do you want to be part of a treasure chest full of gold? Because I think we all know which one we'd want. And that's why, I'm so glad of that whole lone female, take a hike, right? The more the merrier, everyone come on board. But I think what's important is I've been very lucky to have a good surrounding cast, right? Whether they be my superiors, like somebody who can go into those meeting rooms and speak on my behalf when I was a lot younger. And then also just, my peers. So another, I had a couple incidents. I mean, I'm sure there was way more, but two right now that's standing, at the top of my head is when I first got my job at Leafs TV, and I would travel with the team. But I had a great cast, like Joe Bowen, Greg Millen, Jim Ralph, Dennis Bayak. These were guys that I traveled with as well. And, one time too, we were actually we were in Tampa. So the Leafs were taking on the Lightning, and it's morning practice. So we're all, along the boards, we're all just sitting there. We're all just watching, like as one does at morning skate. And this security guy comes and just makes a beeline to me. I need to see your pass. And I'll never forget, like, Joe Bowen going, well, why are you asking just for her pass? Why don't you need to see the rest of our passes? Yeah. And the guy just kind of, was taken aback, but that was the point. It's like, you see men and you see one woman, and that's the woman you think she doesn't belong because she's a woman. The men, they must belong because they're men watching hockey. But the woman, nope. So you better check her media pass and you better check that she has it. So I love, like Joe Bowen, I remember kind of gave a little, take a hike, buddy, because this ain't going to end well for you type of thing. Right. And I had a lot of incidents like that. I'd be walking with them down the halls. You know, we'd be on our way to dressing rooms or whatever, be on our way to do interviews or just, and security always stopped me. And one of them would always speak up on my behalf and say, take a hike. Like, it is so obvious that you are stopping the woman and you're not stopping the men. So, I mean, I had like little incidents like that throughout the way, but I just had a wonderful group of people that I worked with as well. So that was really helpful.
I like, though, like when you mentioned, of course, the comment about like, do you want to be the token or do you want to be like, of course, one in the treasure chest kind of, I guess that was right. But like, I like that there was two stories that come to mind for you that really kind of give you that compliment is when you left Leafs lunch. Now, again, I don't have a memory of a fish, but I might not. There's been so many interviews, so kind of cross references. But I remember Tessa Bonom saying, I think it was you that she kind of went to where you said, I'm leaving Leafs lunch. And she wanted to kind of get her foot in the door of how to get into broadcasting. And I think you either kind of gave her a good word of advice or kind of gave her the heads up that you were leaving. And I think that's how she kind of got her foot in the door with where she's to now. But I believe it was in her interview. Again, listen, there's been a lot.
Leafs TV, yeah. So when I left Leafs
there you
TV,
go. Yeah, Leafs TV. Yeah.
Yeah, they were bringing her on board 100%. Yeah. And that's one thing I have to say I've always taken pride in is I've always left my door open for other women to just come and talk to me. Because when I was younger, I remember certain women ignoring me. I remember them feeling threatened. I remember them not wanting to help. But the feeling that warms me inside and makes me smile are the women who did. And they will always mean more to me, than anything else. And I always want people when they think of me, and I try my best. You can't please everybody. But when people think of me, I want them to smile. I want them to say, yeah, she was kind. Yeah, she took the time. Even if it was 5 minutes, I asked for a piece of advice and she was able to give it, right? Because, it matters. So that's why I say, like, even though I know that you don't really forget that feeling of women who purposely just flushed you because they felt threatened by you. But more than anything, the warmth I felt of those who helped me overpowers that other feeling. And I always said, that's how I want to, make other people feel. And I mean, I'll help anybody. It's not like, it just only women.
I just knock at the door and be like, you're another woman. I'd be like, I have high heels on. Does that make me? And she's like, come in. And I'd be like, all right.
I mean, obviously it's been tougher for women. So we have to call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, my goodness, I just try to open my door no matter what. Like, that's why I try to make myself available. I get, calls to speak to, students at certain universities. And if my schedule permits it, I always try to say yes to that because I know, and even now it's so funny. At One Soccer, where I also work, one of our play-by-play guys, Adam Jenkins, who's great, new in the industry and everything, but he's like, you spoke at my class at Ryerson. It's like, I 100% remember that day because I had a chance to interview you and everything. And that made me feel so good because I clearly gave him advice that worked because look at him thriving in the industry. But now we're working together. So, I mean, it's a small world. So it's pretty cool how that can all come together.
I want to ask you, of course, throughout your whole career, going from all these different places, like, what has been almost the highlight for you? Because in my mind, I think it's like, bringing the Stanley Cup to Haiti, or like you seem like a big soccer person, obviously married a soccer player. But like, I would think that soccer is a big deal, but like in all your career, what would you consider the highlight? This interview, obviously, come on. No.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. Give me a second.
That's fair.
I will say, okay, so there's something so special about professional sports. And you're right, when you're covering, an MLS Cup final or Stanley Cup final, and it's the atmosphere, the vibe, knowing how hard, that team has worked to get to where they are. So I never want to take anything away from any other sport. But to me, the highlight of my career, something that is always so near and dear and continues to take my breath away, is when I worked the Olympics. And my first ever, which was Sochi 2014, I still don't know how to put into words, seeing everyone from around the world, like everyone from around the world converging in one location, and the athletes all wearing their gear in their country colors, even the journalists. So even though we're not wearing Team Canada gear, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that we are the broadcaster from Canada because our coats are red and we have the maple leaf. And, the Italian journalists have their blue jackets with, Italia written on it. And that, you just can tell who is from what country, and all these nations coming together. And there is such a civility about it. If a Canadian won a medal, people would be congratulating you just simply because you're a fellow Canadian. So that's something really special. The Olympics to me is something that always takes my breath away.
No, I mean, that makes sense. You've covered, what was it that you did 2014? You did this year's as well. I think it's interesting just because, Olympics is a really big sport, but when Canada doesn't do so well, how do you take that?
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, I am Canadian, so I'm cheering for the Canadians, but we definitely stay as objective as possible, on the air. But I mean, obviously it hurts, right? If Canada doesn't do well, but see, we've been very fortunate where we have exceptional athletes and they've given us incredible storylines every single Olympics. Like I could sit here now and bore you and take you through, my audio history of the Olympics since I started covering them in 2014. But really all you have to, I mean, the names like Penny Alexiak, Maggie McNeil, Andre DeGrasse, I mean, these are all names, right, that have become household names because of what they've been able to do at the Olympics. And they brought the country together, the Canadian women in that soccer gold medal game and what they were able to do. We can go on and on and on, but we've been pretty blessed in this country to have incredible athletes do amazing things on the world stage. And even if they lose, they do so with grace, they do so with dignity, and they still make this country proud.
That's fair. I probably wouldn't. I'd be up there stamping my foot, and I'd be like, I told you, never bring Newfoundlanders to Olympics.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Andi Petrillo for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter